right now we're in midst of the largest mobilization of the Israeli army reserves, certainly in a generation, maybe since the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago. Already more than 300,000 Israelis have been called up because we're a small country, as I said, only less than 10 million people. So we have a small standing army, but we mobilize people quickly. And in 72 hours, 300,000 soldiers have been called up.
You were just telling me off the air what happened to you and your family on your way to the studio.
Yeah, Eric, this is Israel's 9/11. This is Israel's Pearl Harbor. And we'll get into the details in a moment, but just as a personal way to look at it, literally driving to the TBN studios here to do my interview with you and a number of other Israeli officials tonight, the sirens, the emergency sirens went off, the air raid sirens, right? So what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to keep your windows down and your seatbelt off in case you hear those sirens. You pull over, you turn off your ignition, and you get as far away from your car as you can. And then you dive down on the ground and put your hands over your head and face. Moments later, we heard boom, 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 boom. I think 6 or 7 times as the Iron Dome interceptors took out the missiles that were heading from the Gaza Strip, from the Hamas terrorists, into the holy city of Jerusalem. But I was talking then, I interviewed just before you, the deputy mayor of Jerusalem. She said that one of the missiles got missed by the Iron Dome and slammed into a mosque in an Arab village just outside of Jerusalem. Like, imagine Muslim radical Islamist terrorists shooting at Israel, shooting at the Jews and the Christians, and hitting Muslims. It's so tragic, it's so ugly, and that's just one moment in 3 horrific days.
Well, this is a nightmare, what is happening over there. I'm glad we can reach you to get your perspective on it. I had Laura Logan on before you, and what I keep saying is that the tactics used by the enemies of Israel are evil. In other words, this is not normal warfare. It is evil. It is like the SS going into Poland and just murdering people in cold blood, murdering civilians in cold blood. This is what they're doing. They don't believe in playing by any kind of rules. It's brutal. Obviously, they've taken many hostages. Where does this go from here? Because I was not aware that Hamas was continuing to launch missiles into Israel even now.
Oh, yeah. We're approaching close to 4,000 missiles over the last 72 hours. That's about as many rockets and missiles were fired at Israel over a 30-day period during our last war, okay? And this is just 3 days in. That's bad enough. But you add to it what's creating the death toll here that is off the charts. More Israelis have died, more Jews have died in the last 72 hours than at any period since the Holocaust, okay? We've never had in Israel in a 72-hour period this many Jewish people die. Why? Because what's happening is not only are they firing so many rockets, so many more than ever, but they really caught Israel completely off guard by blowing up the security fence, several sections of the security fence that was built between Israel and Gaza, and then stormed across hundreds and hundreds of Hamas fighters and started slaughtering men, women, and children, killing children in front of their mothers and fathers, killing the mothers in front of the children. Just ghastly. You said Nazis, that's true. I would also say more recently, for people in your audience that may be a little younger, ISIS. Remember when ISIS was just cutting people's heads off and setting people on fire in cages? And all of this ghastly demonic behavior has been happening in the last 72 hours. So here we are, one point, it's critical, Eric. There are more than 800 Israeli civilians have already been killed in the last 72 hours. Israel is a small country, only 10 million people. The United States is a continent, 330 million people. You guys are 33 times larger in terms of population than us. So if you think about the emotional impact, I mean, 800 people, killing 800 people is horrible. But imagine you woke up and you were having to report that 26,000 Americans had been murdered in a 72-hour period. That's the magnitude emotionally of what we're going through right now. And we're heading towards full-scale invasion of Gaza.
What do you believe? I mean, we know that this has been planned for a long time. This was not just, some insurgent raid. This was planned for a long time. It's the 50th anniversary of the 1973 war. We know it took tremendous coordination to do this. I assume Iran is behind that, which is like saying the Biden administration and President Obama are behind it because they've enabled this. What do you suppose is the end game? I mean, does Hamas believe, does Iran believe that they are now actually able to wipe Israel off the face of the map? What do you suppose is going to happen in the next days and weeks ahead?
Well, it's a great question. There's several great points you make there, Eric. Let's just take them one by one. First, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is saying publicly that there's no evidence that Iran is behind, the Iranian regime is behind this attack, okay? But the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Hamas officials themselves told the Wall Street Journal and are telling others that Iran was behind this. So, who do you believe? There's no question that Iran is behind this. Now, what is the end game? There's two questions we have to ask. The first question is, if a second front opens from the north, right, the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror movement with 150,000 missiles, much more powerful than anything coming from Gaza. If that opens up, I wouldn't call it Armageddon because I'm an evangelical, and that's a very specific term, but it's apocalyptic, okay? But if we hold them off, and Hezbollah doesn't open up a second front, then what's the goal? Then the goal would apparently be to lure Israel into a ground war in Gaza. Hamas can't possibly beat a military as big and as strong and as professional as Israel, okay? Why would they want to lure us in? Because they want the images of dead Palestinians. They want Al Jazeera and MSNBC and CNN and everybody else, New York Times, front page, of not just Palestinian fighters, Hamas terrorists. They want the collateral damage photos of children and women that might, because the terrorists are hiding behind them. Why do they want that? They want to slaughter. Why? So that it will make Israel radioactive, toxic, and that Saudi Arabia will back away from the big peace treaty that they're negotiating right now, and that other Arab Muslim countries will back away as well. That's the idea of blowing up this peace process that has been so successful that apparently has lured Israeli officials into thinking we're doing okay. We don't have to guard that border so much. That was terribly mistaken. The most colossal failure in the history of intelligence failure in terms of Israel's modern history. So, but I can't tell you the exact which one of those is right until we know more. But at the minimum, it's the second one.
Well, it is extraordinary, and I think. I want to be clear in speaking to my audience, folks, the Biden administration is behind this. Now, when I say they're behind this, I mean, if you don't care about something, or if you indicate you don't care about something, or you indicate that, you're not sure what you think about something, you invite people to take actions. And so right now, we're dealing with an administration in the White House that is not like the Donald Trump administration. These are not staunch defenders of Israel as a nation. These are people that just gave $6 billion to Iran. They seem to be living in another world. They seem to be living in a world where they kind of think like, well, it's okay for the enemies of Israel to want to attack Israel. They have a point of view. So we're living in a different world than we would if President Trump were in the White House right now. And so that to me is what's a little bit confusing here is where does America stand? I mean, it's one thing to say we stand with Israel, but I don't see the Biden administration standing with Israel in the way that the Trump administration would.
Well, that's certainly true. I would say it a little bit differently than you did, but I certainly hear your perspective. Look, we have to say that President Joe Biden is the most pro-Israel person in the Democratic Party. That's why it's a problem, because I don't think he's maliciously trying to harm Israel. It's just he literally does not understand that with every action, there's a reaction. If you give $6 billion in terrorists to Iran, you're going to get more terrorism, and that's what we've seen.
It seems that Israel is going to go into the territories and that this is part of the plan that Hamas and the enemies of Israel, they want to use this as propaganda to turn the world against Israel.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest problems here is this is a multi-tiered strategy designed not just to kill Israelis, but to try to get Israelis to inadvertently kill Palestinians, right? We're going to go kill and capture Palestinian terrorists, Hamas terrorists. There's no question about that. The problem is that the Palestinian terrorists, Hamas, are hiding behind, number one, the civilian population of the Gaza Strip. There's 2 million Palestinians who live there, and they're under Hamas's reign of terror. Let's be clear. Israel does not occupy the Gaza Strip. Israel's prime minister in 2005 pulled all Israeli citizens and all Israeli soldiers out of Gaza. We haven't been there in almost 20 years. So this is not occupied territory, right? But it is occupied in one sense by Hamas as terrorists. So terrorists are hiding behind the human shields of their own population. That's number one. Now they have captured at least 100 Israeli hostages, men, women, and children. I saw a video today put out by Hamas on social media of small infants, Israeli Jewish infants, in cages, in dog cages, is where they're keeping them. And we, God only knows, are they planning to trade them, sell them, or just murder them and put that all on social media? But that's what, so the terrorists want to lure Israel into a war. And now I don't see how we avoid it. The question is, how do we prosecute it effectively, smartly, when we know no matter what we do, the Biden administration is going to criticize us, maybe not on day one, but certainly by day 10, by day 14, they'll be saying, hey, already Secretary of State Blinken is trying to negotiate with the leader of Turkey to bring a ceasefire. A ceasefire, can I just say that if you've got a school anywhere in America and there's a mass shooter, a mass casualty shooter in the building, you do not tell the SWAT team to do a ceasefire. You don't tell the SWAT team to de-escalate. No, you blow the guy's head off and rescue the children. But already the Secretary of State of the pro-Israel Biden administration is telling us we need a ceasefire. No, we don't. We need our hostages back. We need Hamas eradicated. But how do you do it? Without it, and I don't think there's any other way. I think the world is going to hate us in about a month and maybe sooner. And as what we're reporting on All Israel News and, of course, on my TBN show, the Rosenberg Report, we're trying to cover it from every angle. But I'm telling you, we are not just going into a military battle. We are going into a public relations and media battle, good versus evil, kind and friendly and democratic versus evil and wicked and barbaric. And that's the story. But I guarantee you that's not the story the New York Times or CNN will be reporting in the days ahead. And that's why you and I and others have got to help people understand the truth, because it's going to get messy very, very fast.
Well, again, this is good versus evil, folks. You have to be clear. Israel does not murder innocents. Israel does not go in and murder children and women. They don't do that. But that's what Hamas does. That's what the enemies of Israel do. They are evil. And what they're doing is the kind of thing that you have to condemn. You have to stand against it. You have to defend yourself against it. When you even characterize the Biden administration as being pro-Israel, to me, that's a joke, basically. It's like somebody saying something that is meaningless. It mocks the meaning of what it be to be pro-Israel. Because for Blinken to be so naive as to say what he said is just astonishing to me.
Yeah, but it's important to make the distinction. When I say that Biden is the most pro-Israel in the Democratic Party, the good news in that sentence is that there are forces like Bernie Sanders, who was the second most popular person in the party over the last two presidential cycles, right? Millions and millions, tens of millions of followers. He hates Israel. AOC hates Israel. Rashida Tlaib hates Israel. The whole squad hates Israel. If that faction becomes the dominant faction or the party as a whole, that is curtains for a bipartisan approach to Israel. So I have supported and encouraged and spoken out. Look, we need Biden to be as pro-Israel as he is. The problem is we always have to remember that when he blows up Afghanistan on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and he blows up Israel on the 50th anniversary of Yom Kippur, like those things matter. It's not intentional, but it's still horrible, right? And so I don't think the Biden administration isn't going to provide funding and arms and support, but they're doing it in reverse. They're doing it backwards. Like if you give $6 billion to your worst enemy, you should expect them to do more of what they've been doing, which is robbing, killing, and destroying, like Satan himself.
I think that's what I'm saying. In other words, if he's the most pro-Israel, guy in the Democratic Party, what does that tell you, folks? It's absolute madness. What do you suppose is going to be happening in the next few days? I assume that Israeli intelligence and the Israeli armed forces are this minute preparing a counterattack, trying to figure out how to get the hostages out. I cannot imagine.
Yeah. No, you're right. Right now, we're in midst of the largest mobilization of the Israeli army reserves, certainly in a generation, maybe since the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago. Already more than 300,000 Israelis have been called up because we're a small country, as I said, only less than 10 million people. So we don't have an active standing army like the United States, is 1 million or 1.5 million. I lose track of how many people are in the active regular army every day, right? And then you have ROTC and National Guard and so forth. We have just the opposite. We have a small standing army, but we mobilize people quickly. And in 72 hours, 300,000 soldiers have been called up. The media advisor to the prime minister got called up today. I interviewed him for All Israel News. You can find that at allisrael.com. The former Israeli ambassador to London just got called up to work. Obviously, he'll be working in diplomacy, but I just interviewed him for the Rosenberg Report. So what we're watching is people at every strata. Most of my friends that are under the age of 40, guys, are now moving to the front. So the question is when, how, but a lot of pieces have to be put into place, and they're what I know also, and I can tell you and report to you, is that they're really working that. Why did the ambassador get recalled, even though he's not a current ambassador? Because they're preparing for a massive onslaught diplomatically and in terms of media. So they have to be ready not just for the actual ground and air war, right? They have to be ready for the digital war and the diplomacy war. And we were covering that on All Israel News, but that's why I'm grateful that you're giving this much time, because in these first 72 hours, the way I see it, mostly American media has been actually quite shocked and has, in fact, covered somewhat sympathetically this attack. But I guarantee you, once we counter-assault, Israeli Jews will look like the Antichrist in American and international media.
It's an amazing thing because I don't know, what you're supposed to do when barbarians come in and murder women and children. What are you supposed to do? What would anyone do? You fight back. That's what you're supposed to do. That's the rational response.
Well, that's anti-Semitism, the double standard that Jews, that Israelis, we don't get to play like Americans when we got attacked on 9/11, or the British got attacked, or anybody else on the planet. That anti-Semitism is not just hating Jews, it's treating Jews completely different by different standards. And that's why Christians, in particular, we have a standard, and that's the Bible. And we know, yes, God loves our neighbors, but he loves Israel. He loves the Jewish people, and he has a plan. And that's why Christians need to align ourselves and say, all right, we need to stand with Israel. We have to have compassion for the Palestinians who are trapped under Hamas, right? But this is not a jump ball. It's not a 50-50, 49-51 decision. God loves the nation of Israel, and he calls Israel the apple of his eye. The most sensitive part, the pupil, the way he looks at the rest of the world, he looks at it through the lens of Israel. And the church needs to get this right, and unfortunately, too much of the church is currently getting it wrong. This is at least a wake-up call. Let's see if people do better this time.
I mean, to me, let's call it what it is. Hatred of Israel, anti-Semitism, is a hatred of the God of Israel. There's no other reason to hate the Jews other than the fact that you have a supernatural animus, an evil animus against the God of the Jews. Otherwise, I'm not quite clear what anti-Semitism is. Why do Black nationalist groups and white nationalist groups and people around the world, what is Jew hatred? It's hatred of the God of the Jews. Whether they want to admit it or don't, that's what it is. It's a supernatural hatred. It is evil. And the idea that Israel, should be wiped off the face of the map, the idea that people are giving voice to this, and that we have people in our own country saying, oh, well, they have a point. And, that's to me what's so fascinating here. You talk about a double standard is a very nice way of putting it.
Well, yeah, and I would use the verse John 10:10, right? Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. But the thief, and he's talking about Satan, comes to rob, kill, and destroy. And in that one verse, we see the dichotomy. It's not that Satan is equal with Jesus. He's not. But they're 180% opposite, right? So if God in the scriptures, as he does, says, I love the Jewish people and I'm going to bless them. Satan says, fine, I'm going to curse them. God says, I'm going to choose the Jewish people and give them a land. Satan says, fine, I'm going to take it away. God says, I'm going to make Jerusalem, the city I'm standing in, the city where I live, the city of peace. Satan says, fine, I'll make it a city of bloodshed. God says, I'm going to take that mount behind you, behind me, the Temple Mount, and make it holy to my name. Satan says, I'm going to desecrate it. That's the dynamic. Satan hates Israel and Jews because God loves us. And you're absolutely right. Why doesn't he hate the Kurds this much? Why doesn't Satan hate the Japanese this much, or the Brazilians? Like, he hates everybody, but he has a special, deep, raging animus against us and this city and this place precisely because God loves us and has made that super clear to the world through the Bible. And as an evangelical from a Jewish background and a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, part of my responsibility is to educate the church around the world and mobilize them to learn, to pray, to give, and to go. Now, I wouldn't go right now. Don't come to Israel right now. The airport's open, but all the flights are shut down and all foreigners are leaving right now. So this is not the time to come here. But learning and praying and giving to ministries that are making a difference is critical, not to take away from what needs to be being done right now with the Alliance for Defending Freedom and what Eric is doing. But I want you to pray. I want your audience to pray, but I also want you to think, how can I specifically help? And you can certainly learn more by following us at allisrael.com.
Yes, allisrael.com is the website. Joel Rosenberg, we're going to have to leave it there. God bless you, my friend. We're just glad to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for giving me this much attention on this important issue.